The Essence of Tyranny, it has more clip demarcations throughout it, and it slips in and out of time, and eventually gets you back to AT&T, and then whips right back into your childhood. But it's interesting that you use the Death of the Virgin as Grandma Chin on the Japs, because that is a poem that is far more complex in its own way, and of a completely different style than the prose around it. So you get an excellent contrast between the two.
Well, I do use some theatrical techniques here with the fades here. And I use a lot of the. Well, I use some what do you call slash marks and first grade boom. So it's a lot of changing around and and then let's see, it ends with fade. A little yellow girl's just killed. Grandma Chin wakes from the dream. I wake in the arms of Mrs. Terrence's daughter. All is a blur. She leans in. Valerie Bertinelli, her orange hair friend. She's beautiful. She is beautifuler. Her freckled face, a countenance that sticks. I know her face. Remember, this is what you have been told. I know that face. Simple. Look at the me I want you to. Throughout the whole book, I'm playing.
And it connects with the first line to the last line.
Yeah, and the very title of the memoir is True Life. Is it true to life? Is it real life? Well, obviously it's not true life since it's a memoir and I had to change names. But true life meaning that I was trying to, and I succeeded in this book in trying to put the reality of what I lived center stage, even if I had to use fallacious means.
And then talk about Inside of Ridgewood, if you can recall it, and how it uses one of your lesser great poems, The Runaway, but very effectively in its use.
What page is that? What page is that on?
55.
Okay, let's see here. 55. Always give me the page number. That's the quickest way to get down there. Let's see here. Okay, Inside of Ridgewood. This is one that's I know online, so I don't know how I can answer that. I feel ashamed. Mr. X is too James Bond. Oh, so this is where I'm actually taking. I'm getting inside, and this is a combination of probably half a dozen kids that I knew, the runaway kids, and I am sort of a supporting player in this little memoir. And I'm putting so that in a sense this is one that sets the tone of what the neighborhood was like. This is early 1970s, outer boroughs, New York, lower working class runaways. So this is what So it's basically a bit more for mood, and it's also to say that okay. This whole book is my memoir. It's about Dan Schneider, but it's not. I'm not so wrapped up in myself that I can't make myself a supporting player. This person, and I do that a few other times. I have a memoir about this redhead girl that I knew who disappeared. The ending used in the memoir, the girl named Marita, is different than what really happened. And there are a few other things. I mean, a number of the endings I took for dramatic effect that didn't really happen. So you have 85 to 90% of the memoir is reality, but I sometimes compress timelines, expand timelines, make two people into one, make one person into three, and play with that. But the essence is what's important, and the essence of this one is to give a sense of what it was like in that time here. Tilda soon went to work for Harold Rankin so the Harold Rankin character is sort of a generic pimp, I think, or drug dealer that I just sort of.
But this memoir is interesting in that it plays with the idea of truth too, because any discerning reader will likely come up with the fact that this is just a created conversation rather than anything that's genuine. It's not as if you have a transcript of an interview that an older prostitute made and documented his life and his relationship with you. It's very contrived in a way. There's also interactions with FBI agents and aliens and all sorts of things that clearly are fictitious, but play with the idea of truth in their own way too. because it
Well,
gets into the idea of a mind
well,
and how that mind
let
operates.
me just state about that. I When I talk in one of the memoirs about how I visited some people in prison, and then, for example, there when Paco and I were detained for about 6 or 7 hours, that is actually true. I mean, I was, and so I even say, for example, that somewhere in assault mines in the Dakotas, there's probably a file with my name on it. But some of the things, in one of the later memoirs, I have, like some men in black talking about me or whatnot. This is to give a sense of the late 20th century milieu of paranoia. When I do talk about uh, aliens and whatnot, when I was a kid, for example, some of the things that I described, for example, when I drowned in the lake, I saw, I had this dream of meeting these odd, what I call feline looking children. It wasn't until about a decade later that I found out, and it was some book. It was a book written by a woman I later found out was named, I had forgotten, named Addie Kent Jeffrey. She wrote about paranormal stuff, and this is where I first heard the tale of so-called green kids. Now, in the 1970s or 80s, and this is, I'm digressing, but for a reason. In the 1970s or 80s, there were lots of these paperback books. I'm writing in my current spy book about Bit von Rheingold, the dwarf, who also was publishing a lot of these crap books, and you would get these legends from centuries ago or from decades ago about people. And it's interesting to see how they mutated online, because it wasn't until the mid 90s or so that these legends of green kids who showed up out of a mine shaft and claimed to have been from another world was specifically located, I believe, in Scotland or Wales. Before that, I had read versions of the stories that these kids showed up in Spain and they showed up in France and all over Europe. But uh, I had had this very similar kind of dream or experience when was drowning. My mind obviously produced it. I don't think that I really met these otherworldly children, but it's interesting because this is why I've always thought that people who have claimed to be abducted by aliens, or people who claim to have had sex with incubi or succubi, these are all versions of how people interpret the way their brain works. You see Jesus Christ, another guy sees Buddha. I see utter blankness or whatnot. So I use a lot of these.
It's interesting that your memories, though, of these things are less generic than the stated phenomenon over and over, like the what is his name, Barney, and
Yeah,
his wife Hill, who
exactly.
was documented in Terry Matheson's book Alien Abductions, as well as several stories reported on
And
them. They were the first
right. And
mainstream couple
let me just comment on that, because this is
recognize
very
phenomena.
important, and this is one thing that I've said to many people. People are mostly not creative. If you want to know why gray aliens with big bug eyes, ever since the Betty and Barney Hill thing, have dominated the abduction narrative, it's because people aren't creative. They're abducted. Why are they abducted? We want to take your semen. We want to take your eggs. Why? Because our civilization is dying. A classic 1950s movie trope. With me, when I had that, for example, I talk about what I call the hoods, which were these red-eyed beings that were wearing sort of these kind of fedoras like gangsters. This is the same thing. I didn't see aliens, bug-eyed aliens, coming to me. I saw what were obviously sort of id-like projections of the gangsters that I grew up with glowing red eyes, like a fawn. Like I have that great poem that I put up, "The Woodpecker in the Tree in the Darkness of Light." The glowing red fawn's eyes. So instead of seeing
It's
bug-eyed
and
aliens,
in scenes of danger or scenes of murder, the glowing red eyes are a recurring motif throughout the book.
yeah, and this is the thing too. Like I talk about with my cat friend, and behind the rose bush, and seeing this big black sedan. Or I have when I went in the bicentennial year to my friend Joey's summer home. And I had an incident. I even wrote a poem called something about incident in a cornfield or something. And I don't know if I used the poem in the memoir, but I wrote a memoir about the same thing there. This went on probably through my late 20s or so. I think the last time, but also too, there were times when I did have actual real people from certain organizations check on me. I'll give you an example. I think I talk about it in one of the memoirs. There was this child rapist serial killer who cleaned the parking lot at fine ass supermarket where I worked. His brother was a rotten, dirty cop who got him off. He had attacked one of the older women who worked there. Her husband then attacked him. They went to court. I was going to testify that he had raped this boy that I'd gone in to get a wrench one day to to fix a leakage or whatnot in the store. I saw this young boy with a bloody ass laying on his a naked boy about 14 or 15 laying with his naked ass bloodied on this pedophile's bed, and I reported him. The dumbass pedophile never suspected that it was me. He thought it was the old lady because a street kid like me would not break the code, so to speak. It's like, I'm going to let this fucker rape this kid and not break a code.
It's interesting when you bring that up. I just want to make this point because I have read Tumbleweeds and several of your books, and that scene I had originally thought was from Tumbleweeds. So these books, in fact, become sort of like your memories, and they have that Ozu-like or Lorne Isley effect in that the style sometimes is so cohesive in a way that they blend in together, and you forget exactly where they were originated from, and they become your de facto memories until you can reveal them for where they were.
Yeah, it's like if you ask me, I'd have to look up the names of, if you give me a name of a character, I'm going to forget who it was. But if you tell me what that's about, I know the real name of the person. Now I forget what point I was going to make. I was making a point here.
About the boy who was the man who was raping these boys around grocery stores.
Yeah, but what led me into that? There was a larger point I wanted to make about him. Uh, what were we talking about before that? Uh, the way the memory. Well, see, yeah. This is why it's a good thing not to distract me because I forget too easily. But anyway, it'll probably come up again.
I'll note it and we'll see if we can unveil it again.